Well, I'm here with Asher Wolf, who is a self-described Melbourne-based journalist, internaut, information activist and gonzo political theorist. Asher writes for Guardian Australia. Now, Asher has recently been reporting upon various privacy breaches alleged to have been made by the Immigration Department. I think they've acknowledged that did happen. But more disturbingly for Reporters Without Borders, apparently there has been some demand by the Department of Immigration and Border Protection for Asher's materials related to that story, which then goes on to the Reporters Without Borders radar. So I'm ringing to find out from Asher a little bit more about both the story itself and about this alleged threat to her. Hi, Asher.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Good. So could you explain just the background to this story and what this threat is from the Department of Immigration and Border Protection?
Well, just in terms of background, I was fiddling around looking at statistics on the Department of Immigration and Border Protection's website. Completely public website, completely public documents. And then we realised that something was sitting within a document, didn't need to be hacked, it was sitting there publicly. And it turned out to be the names and boat details and immigration ID numbers and locations and nationalities of just over 10,000 people in the immigration system who are in community detention and also in detention, asylum seekers, and it's been described as the largest privacy breach in Australian history by the government. And just to clarify, yes, it is the government's privacy lapse. They caused it, not me, because probably quite a lot of people had found it before me. We're aware that other governments look at these stats and would have had access and probably had scanned this stuff themselves. So. The response from the government was to reframe the issue rather than sort of saying, oops, we made mistakes, sorry, let's fix it up, was to frame it as though it had been illicitly accessed, that, the confidential information had to be given back, that the files had to be given back. Now, it's kind of a crazy idea that one can give back files that have been publicly distributed on the internet because millions of people could have accessed it. The idea that one person giving back a set of files, such as myself, would in any way negate the distribution of files across the internet was kind of laughable. And they also wanted to know if I'd shared the file with anybody. So my response, well, first of all, I spoke to the lawyers at The Guardian, and then I spoke to my own lawyer. And at the end of the day, we decided that we'd put a fairly straight email back, which was, first of all, I protect my sources. I'm not going to reveal if anybody I've worked with. And the second thing was, I'm not going to be handing over any of my devices to the government. And look, in many ways, I actually think that the framing of the letter, the way in which it was written, wasn't quite so much a demand as in the government desperately trying to figure out how they could minimise the harm that they'd already caused, but going about it in a way that was very unsavvy in terms of the internet and distribution of files online. They said things like, you need to reduce the ability to cause harm. Now, we never, ever revealed the names of anybody. We never revealed the contents, the details. We never said where the file was. And the Minister for Immigration, Scott Morrison, went ahead on television and talked about the location of the file while it was still archived online. That's where it's at. It was an interesting learning curve for me. I've never been through anything like that before.
Well, are you saying that the file itself was publicly accessible and that's where you got it. It wasn't really from a whistleblower that was sending you information off the back of a truck or something. It was basically something any of us could have accessed on the internet at the time. So
well, now that it's no longer archived online, basically, I can explain. I was looking at statistics about people in detention that were publicly available on the department's website, and every month they used to upload the stats, and it was sitting in one of the documents.
Okay, and you're describing their letter not so much as a demand, but more as a request. Is that what you're saying?
I think that they wanted to cover themselves. I think it was a request. I had to take it in a serious fashion because they were trying to, in the way that it was framed, it was trying to put the onus of responsibility for the leak on the journalists. And the reality is, we never revealed anything. We never did anything apart from our duty as journalists, which is to talk about the fact that there'd been an issue. We made sure that we notified the department before there was any printing of any story. I think the really important thing for young journalists, particularly students or people coming into the field, to be aware of is that, first of all, you have to be really, really careful with who you work with, because you want to be able to trust your co-journalists. You want to try and have institutional protection if you can. So things like joining the MEAA or the AJA, so that you join a union, you have a bit of clout behind you. Other things like you may want to make sure that you've got an actual newspaper that you're working with, so you're not just a freelancer, so you can use their lawyers. I was very lucky that I had my own lawyer who was, she is a great lawyer, but you don't want to have to shell out for a lawyer if it goes to court.
Just coming back to the actual case then, do you think it was sort of like a sternly worded way of protecting themselves or trying to shore up the damage that had been caused by this privacy leak?
I think that they were trying to, minimise their own stuff up, basically. And the best way for them to do that was to shoot the messenger or try to shoot the messenger. And basically, I wasn't having a bar of it. And
Well, this comes against a background of several incidents over a few years to do with that department and its predecessors, with various regulations on access to detention centres and stemming right back to media manipulation with the Children Overboard affair, which must be now a decade or more ago. So are there any other instances where you've encountered immigration department or federal government pressure over your stories or your sources?
Yeah, sure. With customs, they have what they call a newsroom. There's no such thing as news from government, it's PR, right? But they call it their newsroom, and they release information for the public, but also some of the high-quality images and videos that they release are only available to professionals with a newsroom account, what they call newsroom account, PR account. And I wanted access to them, at which point they said, "You're a freelancer." And I said, "Yes, that doesn't make me any less a professional." And they said, "Well, give us the name of your editor or a professional accredited organisation's email account." And I said, "I can't do that. I'm a freelancer. I work for SBS, I work for The Guardian, I write for The Drum, I occasionally write for New Childer. I don't have an email address from, Sky News or from News Limited or, Fairfax or wherever." At which point I realised they weren't going to give me access, and I called the MEAA and asked them if they'd draft a letter for me. And they did. They drafted a letter saying I was a member in good standing, and we sent that back. And Customs got back to the MEAA and said, "Oh, okay, well, she's entitled for access then." And I, used my Twitter account as well to put pressure on. To be honest, working outside the framework of traditional media, I hustle. I use whatever pressure or leverage I can to make contacts, to get a story out, to understand the context of what's going on, and mostly to protect myself.
Well, that's interesting, because really what you're getting at there with that story is the difficulties new media representatives as private bloggers, citizen journalists, freelancers face as we get the demise of the traditional media and those power structures and access mechanisms that traditional media have traditionally had. Yeah. Asha, I promised you about a 10-minute interview. We're about there, so we might end the formal interview here, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.